Okay, I guess everyone has arrived, so we're going to start with this webinar. Hello all, my name is Carl Anderson and I'm part of the R&D team, and before starting this webinar we're going to start with a quick poll. So if you could please answer the question that will pop up on your screen. It should launch anytime soon. There we go. So the first question is, where have you first heard about CodeFluent entities? So if you could please all answer the questions so that we can move on to the next one. And there's another question popping out afterwards, and after that we'll start the webinar. Okay, and the second question is, what kind of .NET products do you use today in your environment? All right, thanks. Let's start with the webinar then. So I'm going to launch the presentation. We're going to start with a few slides, not much, just like 5 minutes, and then we're going to go on with the demonstration. So CodeFluent entities, less plumbing, and more business features. So what is CodeFluent entities? I'm going to leave you guys a few seconds so that you can read this slide, and then I'm going to comment on it. Okay, so basically what it means is that CodeFluent entities is a code generator, which from a model containing your business logic will generate 100% functional code. Generation isn't a one-shot action. Instead, it's it will be continuous throughout developments and the project. So the idea is that CodeFluent entities will generate all the recurrent and low-value code, so all the plumbing, so that you'll be able to focus on what truly matters, such as the UI or the business logic of your application. And we'll see how it works in a demo right afterwards. However, before diving in the demo, I'll just explain the global process of developing an application using CodeFluent entities. So the first step is to define your business logic in your model. At this stage, we're totally agnostic of any technology, and we specifically focus on the key concepts of our application, their properties, relations, between one another, business rules, and so on. The model isn't necessarily a single file. It can be chunked into what we call parts to increase readability and allow team collaboration. I'd like to emphasize the fact that the model isn't a UML or a data access or a mapping model. It really is a pragmatic one, which only contains a functional description of the application and which is readable by non-technical users, and that's a key point. Everything is centralized in this model, so you don't have to repeat yourself with database schemas, class diagrams, or UML models. Everything is driven from that model. It's very pragmatic and readable representation of your business logic and your application. So once your functional elements have been defined, you need to specify the platforms you want to target. So a SQL Server or an Oracle database, a C# object model, say an ASP.NET website, or maybe a WCF Smart Client, or even a SharePoint website. All those platforms that I just mentioned are all supported out of the box by the product. And to do so, you're going to define what we call producers. Each producer targets only one platform and will translate the platform-independent model into actual code. So for instance, the SQL producer will generate a table for each entity, properties will become columns, methods will become stored procedures, instances will become actual lines of data. On the other hand, the business object model producer will generate classes, properties, methods for each of your entities, and so on. Each producer translates a platform-independent concept into their equivalent for their target platform. Moreover, each generated layer knows how to interact with the other ones. For instance, the object model consumes the database, WCF services consume the model, and so on. So at this stage you already have 100% functional code which you can compile and use right away. Nevertheless, we at CodeFluent don't think that generated entire enterprise class application from bottom to top is possible. There will always be some very specific screen or very complex business rule that will require some handmade or custom code. We don't intend to replace developers, but help them get more productive by taking from their backs all the tedious work so they can, focus elsewhere. And therefore, the generated code is entirely extensible. All classes are partial classes, and moreover, those generated classes are plain old classes, only implementing interfaces and not deriving from any base technical class. So I like to emphasize the fact that all handmade extensions such as partial classes won't get overwritten on the next generations. And this is also true with the database. CodeFluent Entities provides a diff engine which updates the database at each generation instead of dropping everything and recreating everything over. By updating, I mean that if I rename a column, if I rename a property, a column will be renamed. And for instance, if I change the type of my property, the column will be changed as well. This way, you'll never lose data, and you'll always be able to continuously generate until your application is complete. Once you generated and added the custom logic that you wanted to, all you have to do is compile. Since CodeFluent Entities generates completely standard code, there is absolutely nothing specific to this stage, and nor there is anything specific to running or testing the code. This is, from the extend stage up to the test stage, those are actually entirely standard pure .NET development. And obviously those few steps from extend to test are in fact a sub-cycle in the application development lifecycle, and it can be repeated as much as needed. However, if ever a structural change is needed, like adding a new entity, renaming one, removing columns, or whatever else, you're going to have to go back to the model, update it, and generate over. So at this point, you're then off for a new cycle. Add and modify custom code if needed, and as desired, compile over, test again, and so on. If ever you realize you need an extra entity, update the model and start a new cycle over again. So this is basically the idea behind developing applications using CodeFluent Entities. And now that you're aware of how it globally works, let's see how it goes in action, and let's start with a demo. So I'm going to get out of PowerPoint, and what we're going to do is we're going to start Microsoft Visual Studio. And prior to this demonstration, I installed CodeFluent Entities on my laptop. So here I'm going to start and create a new project. And you'll see that now I have a new project template, a CodeFluent Entities one, and I have several templates here. And we're going to use a blank model. And so we're going to start from scratch, developing a small application, which I'll name Order Process. And my project, I'm going to name it Model. And my application here is name Order Process. I'm going to name my solution after my application. I'm going to put it right there, and then we're off. So I'm going to keep as the default namespace the Order Process, which is my solution name. And I'm going to open the surface right here, and we're going to start designing our application. So here on this canvas, I'll be able to create my application. And the first step is to create entities which will represent my business concepts that I want my application to be able to manipulate. So the first one is a customer, which we're going to add to a new namespace named Order Process sales. So you don't have to create new namespaces. I could use the default one. I just want to show you that you can customize all that and do whatever you want. I'm going to add another one in the order namespace, and I'm going to use the same one as the customer. And I'm going to add a third entity named product, which we're going to add to another namespace, so that you can see that that CodeFluent Entities can handle multiple namespaces. And this one, I'm going to name it catalog, for instance. Order Process, catalog, product, all right. So now I got my main entities, and I'm going to start defining their properties. So I'm going to start by adding an ID for my customer. We're going to add say an email, and instead of using a string, I'm going to use another type named email. So as you can see, CodeFluent Entities type system provides, well, standard types such as all those well-known .NET or database types such as strings, integers, floats, and so on. But you can also have some more higher level types such as email or image or audio or stuff like that. So it's okay. Then I'm going to start adding properties to my order entity, and we're going to start adding a reference for my order, and I'm going to add a price of I'm going to use the currency type here. And as for the product, I'm going to add an ID, and we're going to add a name there. So here I have value properties. And now I need to set up relations between all my entities. So for instance, a customer will hold an order, and I'm going to keep it on the string type, and I'll show you why right after. Then on the order entity, I'm going to add, say that one entity has one customer, and actually a customer has many orders. So I'm going to keep it that way. I also want to show you the property grid, which is pretty nice because you can see all the attributes, well, all the properties of all of the current concept that is selected. So I got customers here, and I'm also going to add an order has products. All right, and now what I'm going to do by holding Shift and clicking on my properties, I can start drag and dropping relations. I'm going to go one customer has many orders, see customer orders, so that's a one-to-many relationship, all right? Now what I'm going to do is here, one order can have several products, and products can be referenced in several orders. So I'm going to add a many-to-many relationship, and here I'm pointing to the entity instead of pointing to the target property, and I'm going to specify a many-to-many relationship here. There, so here I got basically my entities, relations, and properties. Also, to show you the type system, I'm also going to add an enumeration, which is basically it's basically a C# enumeration, nothing more to that. So I'm going to go order status here, and I'm going to add it to the order process.sales namespace. And we're going to add some values to that one. Oops, not a renderer. I'm going to add as value, we're going to start by to be delivered. There, we're going to add another one saying in process, and then a third one going, let's say shipped. We're going to go shipped. All right, then here we're going to add another property named status. And instead of using a standard type, I'm going to go in the advanced mode. So here you can see that I can select another entity or its collection version. So this will, if I do that, it will set a relationship. It's kind of like pointing with the shift click feature. I could also select my auto status enumeration, but I could also browse in the CLR types and actually use standard .NET types. So I'm not going to do it here, but just to show you that it's possible and fully integrated into the product. So here I'm going to use order status here and click OK. All right. So here basically I'm done by this stage. So obviously this application being quite small, having all your namespaces and entities on a single surface or stored in a single XML part is okay, right? But this being said, I'd like to emphasize the fact that you can chunk your model into several surfaces or parts for readability reasons, and more importantly to allow collaboration on a single model. So like for instance here, if I go in surfaces, I could add new surfaces, and same in parts, you can see that I only have a single one where all my entities and namespaces are defined, but I could add a new part as well. So still on the collaboration subject, CodeFluent Entities also supports source control servers such as TFS and SVN and so on. So if you click on the project, you could go add solution to source control, and depending on the source control server that you have configured in your Visual Studio, it will add it to your, well, it will add the project to it. Okay, so at this stage we basically built a little order process application with a couple of entities, relations and all. If you remember my application lifecycle slide, this is basically the design stage. We define the business logic of my application. Then as you remember, the next step is to actually generate the corresponding code. So as you can see, here we have a totally platform-independent model. All we have is entities, properties, and so on. So how the generation process works is that CodeFluent entities will build an in-memory representation of this model, what we call a meta model, and then we'll call each producer one by one, which will translate this meta model into actual platform-specific code. As you can see, it's not a template-based at all, and this meta model is actually a key point in CodeFluent entities. So before generating, you can actually view this meta model by clicking the auto process, the default namespace tab, and click View Inferred Model. And here, this new window pops up, and you can navigate into this meta model, into this inferred model. So here you can see that I have in my object model, you can see that I have my namespaces with their object in them. And then if I start navigating into my platform-independent database layer, you can see all the tables with all my tables and the association table that was inferred from my model. And you see for the customer entity, you can see all the properties that were inferred. So here you can see the two ones that I actually declared, but you can see all as well that have tracking properties, columns, and as well as a concurrency row version column. And this is because by default all entities in the CodeFluent Entities project have the default concurrency mode here set to optimistic. So here for this little application we don't need it. So if I set it to none, you'll see that this column will disappear. And same for the tracking. By default entity tracking mode is set to default, which tracks user and time. So if we unset that, hit save, and look at it over again, you can see here that now I only have my customer ID and email columns that were inferred from my entity. So here, as you can see, by clicking and turning some buttons, I can actually make application-wide changes thanks to this meta model logic. So same, say for instance that I have some specific naming convention in my corporation. So for instance, if I go, if I want to change that and change the way tables are and database objects are generated, I can go and use the uppercase naming convention. So those are built-in naming conventions, but you can also actually provide your own by implementing the naming convention interface. So you can extend all what you see. And here, if I click View Inferred Model again, you can see that now all my tables are now in uppercase, as well as my columns, constraints, and so on. So here, by turning some buttons, I can actually make application-wide changes, which is very interesting. And to do all that, it's all thanks to the CodeFluent Entities API, and so that you know just the way that you can create custom naming conventions, you can also create what we called aspects, which also apply to this meta model. So before anything is generated, so you can make application-wide changes, and we actually provide some aspects by default, such as data localization aspect, or what we call a text search aspect, which basically allows you to implement a Google-like text search in your applications. And we have some more, and as you can see, those are basically just an XML file using the CodeFluent Entities API to provide application-wide features. So that's actually a key point using CodeFluent Entities. And all that you can, well, we have built-in ones, but you can also create your own, and all that process is fully documented. Okay, so now that we did all that, and we're actually going to generate our application. And to do so, I'm going to start by adding new projects, which will contain my generated code. So first, I'm going to add a SQL Server 2008 project, which will contain my database scripts, and I'm going to name it autoprocess.persistence. All right. And we're going to add another one, another project which will contain my C# classes, my object model, and this one's going to be a class library here, and I'm going to name it as my default namespace auto process. Okay, I don't need this class1.cs file, so I'm going to remove it. And I'm also going to add another project, which will be a small console application to show you how to manipulate the generated code, and I'm going to name it autoprocess.console app. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to configure my solution. Since CodeFluent entities will generate my scripts and deploy them, I don't need my project to deploy them when I hit F5, nor do I need it to build my application. I want to be able to build it whenever I want and only when I want to. So click apply, and this is it. So basically now we have, well, my Visual Studio solution is ready, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some producers which will translate my platform independent model into actual code. So I'm going to add a SQL Server producer here, which will point to my persistent project there. All right, and I'm going to add another one, which is my business object model here, and I'm going to make it point to my class library project there. I'll click OK. I'm going to save my project, and I hit build. And so here it basically builds my inferred model, my meta model, as you can see here when it loads the model, and then it starts each of my producers one by one, which will generate and run the script and then generate all my C# classes, which you can see right away right here. So here, as you can see, I got in my namespaces all my classes that are generated, and you can see as well here in my persistence project that I have a set of scripts that were generated here, and those were automatically run on my database. So of course you can configure all that if you don't want this behavior, but you can do all that yourself. So here, if I update, you can see here that I have well, my tables as 1 to 2 as they are named, and only with the ID and email property and all the tracking properties and so on. Okay, so basically it generated all that, and all we have to do is use what we generated. But since I don't have any data yet, what I could do is what we're going to do is we're going to add an instance so that it will generate with some data, so I can test my generated components. So I'm going to add a T-shirt in my products. We're going to build again, and then in our console application, what we're going to do is we're going to load all the products and print them in my console. So this is basically what I want to show you, is that everything is model-driven. I can generate continuously throughout my developments. So here, and what we're going to do here is my console application needs to reference my auto process project, and it also needs to have the CodeFluent entities runtimes. CodeFluent entity runtime web. Oops, I forgot Windows base. By default, all CodeFluent entity generated classes implement the iNotify property changed interface, which is provided in the Windows base DLL. So here, basically, now that I got all that, I'm going to go product collection there. So I need to use the autoprocess.catalog namespace, and I'm going to go products equals product collection dot load all, which generates basically, yep. So this will load all my products, and now I'm going to loop through all of them and print their name. So I'm going to go console dot write line product there, and I'm going to go p dot name there. So if I hit Control F5, now you should see one line in my console application, which basically loads a single product. Okay, built, then I hit Control F5. Oh, okay, sorry. It's because I need to set it as my status project because it was running my order persistence project. So here, Control F5, and you can see a single line, which is my t-shirt product that I just created. And now, like I said, everything is centralized in my model. So at this stage, we've gone through a complete cycle going from design to run and test, all that driven by the model. However, I'm realizing that we forgot a description property on one of my products, on my products. So let's update our application and start with a new cycle. So to do so, I'm going to go back to my model here, and we're going to add a new property that I'm going to name description there, of the string type. I'm also going to add a new instance here that I'll name, let's say, code, and as a description we'll provide this is a description there. And now we're gonna build again. So here, if you remember my classes here, I got a product. If you do a little select so that you can see how it is there. Okay, and if I go select start, all that. Now, as you can see, I only have 2 columns and my t-shirt line. So now if I build over again, you'll see that it won't drop my database. It will only add a new column. And for instances, without any default, the default value is inserted into the newly created column for instances that don't have such a value. So here, if my database was updated, but my object model was also updating as well. So if here I can actually add my description now, and all that without having to code a single line. So if I start over again, I have now 2 lines with the name and a description if there is one. All right, so now we've gone through several cycles, and you're basically aware of how to create your application. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go a little further, and I'm going to add some new methods to manipulate my data. And one of them is I want to be able to load all my orders based on their status. So I'm going to go load by status and create one. And instead of actually having to code my SQL code, I'm going to create a CFQL query, which stands for CodeFluent Entities CodeFluent Query Language, and I basically can model a query. And what's very interesting is that my SQL server, is that my producers will actually translate this platform-independent query into actual SQL code. So for instance, a SQL Server producer will translate it into T-SQL, and if I specify an Oracle database producer, it will translate it into PL/SQL. And well, I don't have any joins on that one, but basically all you can do is navigate through the models, and joins will be deduced for you and generated for you, so you don't have to think about all that. So now I'm generating over again. It will update all my layers. And going back to my little console application now, I can basically load all my orders. Going order collections. There I'm going to go orders, and then order collection dot load all. Load by status. And I'm going to specify the ship status. Okay, but I don't have any data, so doing that will only show empty lines. So I'm going to add some data here. Going first. There, we're going to add an instance, and I'm going to name it info@softfluent.com. There, and then here I'm going to add another instance of the 42 price status. I'm going to put it to shipped so that my method actually returns something. And the customer, I'm going to select the customer that just created, and I'm going to use the 2 products that we created previously. Okay, I'm going to hit save. I'm going to generate all over again. And now if I start with my, if I go back to my program.cs and then actually run this code, oh no, not yet. I need to actually loop on all my orders. So if I go order O in orders there, and then if I go console.writeLine order here, and that we go o.status. There, you should print a single order, which should be of the shipped status. There we go. So here we just added some new stored procedures and used it in our application. So that was actually pretty straightforward. Now, what if I want to provide some validation in my application, which is a completely standard need? Well, let's do that. And I'm going to add some validation rule. Say, for instance, here I had an email property, and I want to make sure that users only type in some well-formatted emails validated by this regular expression. As you can see, we also provide some other validation rules, such as to compare two values, create custom ones, to validate Loon codes such as social security numbers or credit card numbers or so on. And you also have lots of different types of rules, which I'll let you discover using the documentation or checking out our website afterwards. All right. So, and also I'm gonna consider valid emails. Emails valid only those of the CodeFluent.com domain. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to build over again. And what we're going to do is we're going to validate a customer. So to do so, there, I'm going to create a new customer there, and I'm going to specify an email, and this one will be invalid, going like test@hotmail.com. And I'm going to go see.validate there, and what we're going to do is we're going to handle the CodeFluent entities validation exception. So this is here, which is CodeFluent validation exception, and I need to use the namespace, and I'm going to go V, and what we're going to do is basically just print the message, the error message here, and that would be the message of that code. So obviously all of that is documented. And now if we start over again our application, you can see that the test@hotmail.com value for email has an invalid email, and the list of valid domains are software.com, and all that without developing any lines of code. All I'm doing is basically just using what gets generated, so I can focus on my UI and my business logic and not all of the plumbing. All right, so going back to my model. Okay, so I created some. So that was a fairly easy. Validation rule. But what if I want to add some very custom logic? Say, for instance, before I save an entity or before I delete something, do some specific stuff that I need to code myself. So what we're going to do is you can do that by adding what we call lifecycle event rules. So basically, before an entity loads parameters, says, or let's say let's do something before a customer gets saved, and we're going to add some custom logic there. So basically all I have to do is add a onBeforeSave rule, and we're going to generate it over again. And unlike previously, my business object model is not going to compile right away, since my generated class will actually expect a onBeforeSave method. So here, as you can see, I get a compilation error here. And if we take a look at it, you can see that now the save method is actually calling an onBeforeSave method. And since there are none that are generated by default, I get this compilation error. And like I said previously in the presentation, you can actually, all generated classes are partial classes, so I can actually add a partial class. We'll name it customer.partialClass and public partial class here, and I'm going to add my onBeforeSave method in this partial class, so that it does not get overwritten on another generation. So here I'm only going to print onBeforeSave here, there. All right, and now if I build, it should compile without any problem. And if I go back to my program here, what we're going to do is going to specify some valid email there, and instead of simply validating it, we're going to save this customer. So if I will go Control F5, you can see that my custom code was actually called. So here's how you can extend all the generated code. Now, another key point that I want to show you is that you're putting all your knowledge, all your business logic, all your application logic in this model, and I'd like to emphasize the fact that this model is actually XML based and human readable, and less than the graphic view for sure, but still it's a better way, it's better than most competitors, and it's actually easy to pre-process or post-process if you need to. So I just want to show you that XML here. So here, for instance, I got a project, I got an entity named customer, you can see the properties. For each property I got a rule, and so on my instances. So all that is basically just XML. And what's great about all that is that actually the XML and the graphic view are actually synchronized in both ways. Adding an entity in the graphic view adds some XML, but also adding some XML nodes actually adds graphic elements on the surface. So here, if I add, like, you name this one to extra email, and then I save that one, here, as you can see, the extra email property appeared with the rule and so on. So whether you're working with the surface or the XML is basically the same thing, and the XML is also pretty easy to generate if you want to pre-process it. Well, pre-process it or post-process it, and all that is not embedded into some binary file format or something like that. It's all standard XML, and all that is documented. So that's a key point with the product as well. Okay, so this is it for this demonstration. I'm going to skip to another one, which is actually the exact same application, except that I added some producers to that one. So what I'll do here is I'm going to load that project. There. Okay, here we go. All right, so here's so as you can see, the model is the same. However, we added some producers to that one, starting with a sub-producer named the service producer, which produces WCF services, contracts, and operations and all that, so that I can expose my business object model to external processes. So here, if I take a look at my namespaces, you can see that I got services and contracts for those services, and also it generates a proxy, a WCF proxy, so that I can, on the client side, easily consume those services and actually have a remote version of my business object model, so I get the same ease of development on the client side. Then you can also see here that I have some other producers. Here I got a server config template producer, which basically produces the WCF configuration files, so I can easily launch my services and consume them in a smart client. I also added a smart client producer, which generates a WPF smart client application, which uses the generated WCF proxy and generates all screens. So all that smart client is actually 100% generated. And also added the SharePoint Web Parts producer, which actually generates 100% SharePoint website that we're going to see. And last but not least, I also added an order process web app, and this one is not generated. This one actually wrote it myself, and that's basically a handmade ASP.NET MVC application, so that you can see that kind of like the way we created the console application earlier in the first part of the demonstration. It's just as easy to create any .NET client using the generated components. So I'm going to build the model over again, and I'm going to show you those generated UIs as well as the custom one of the ASP.NET MVC one. Okay, so I'm going to start with the SharePoint UI because that's definitely my favorite one. So here, if we load that one over again, so you can see that by default I got a document library that gets created using CodeFluent entities with all the web parts that are configured with one another, so I can actually test them before using them and placing them in an actual SharePoint site. So it's loading. Okay, there we go. And so here I got my auto process. Then if I click sales, so those you can see that they are equivalent to my namespaces. And if I click on the customer list, so this is a 100% generated page that you'll see in a minute. And you can see that I have two web parts that I got generated. One, what we call the grid web part, which is a grid view of all your data, and then you also have the form view here, a form entity part, which lets me have a detailed view of a single instance. And both of those web parts are actually connected to one another, so that you can work on all those. And as you remember, I have my validation rule, and since my UI is based on my business object model, I benefit from all those rules. So here, if I specify some invalid email here, and I go save, you can see that I get my same validation message as I used to have in my console application. And that's basically the same for all my targeted UIs. So if I go back to my Visual Studio solution here, and if I Control F5, this is actually going to start my smart client. So on the first part, you'll see in a console that my WCF services will be launched, and then right after that, it will launch my WPS smart client. And so all those are also 100% generated. So here it's starting all my services. So I gotta wait that all of them are started. Now that they are, I can kind of like the same way I could in my SharePoint application. I can view all my customers, and that's exactly the same. I mean, since they're all consuming the same database and the same business object model, we find the same data, and it has the same business rules. So here, if I go with some non-softfluent.com email, it will be considered invalid with the same validation message. So they all consume the same data. So here, for instance, if I create a new customer, say support@softfluent.com, and then I click OK there, and if I go back to my SharePoint website and that will refresh this web page, you can see that my support client is there. So basically, supporting a new technology gets pretty much as easy as adding a new producer. Okay, last but not least, I want to show you my ISP.NET website. So going back here, I'm going to start it, and before launching it, well, no, I'm going to start it so that you can see it. So I'm going to go debug, start a new instance. So this will launch my ISP.NET web server there, and this one will load all my DLLs and files, and I'll be able to view it in my browser. All right, and this will take a few seconds. And so I basically used the default ASP.NET MVC website template, so you'll recognize the UI, except I added a customer's view and customer controller. So while it loads, I'm actually going to show you the code behind that, and you'll see that the code is very straightforward. It's pretty much the same code as in my my console application. All I have to do is use the generated classes and provide them to my view, and in my views, all I have to do is well, take care of the presentation. So here in the customers, so if I click on the customer, it's going to use the customer controller. You can find all the data that we just created, and same again, since I'm using the same components, it always is the same. Well, it uses the same business object model with the same rules and so on. So all I have to do, I mean, the tagline is basically less plumbing and more business features. So that's what we mean by saying that. Okay, so this is it for this demonstration. I'm going to end with the third and last one. And in this last part of my demonstration, I want to show you that you can work with existing application, and you can actually start start from an existing application to create a new model. So here, I'm going to add a new blank CodeFluent Entities project there, and I'm going to name it Northwind because I'm going to import the Microsoft Access database example name Northwind, and I'm going to place it right here. All right. So I'm going to keep the default namespace, and instead of designing our application just like we did earlier, I'm actually going to import from an existing application. As you can see, I can import from existing databases, but also I can import from an entity framework model or some XML model or some enterprise architect UML models. So here I'm going to use the Access importer, and I'm going to make it point to my Northwind database. Okay, and here mine is in my documents, and I'm going to specify all files there, and I should have the northwind.accdb. Okay, and then the default namespace is Northwind. The target part is northwind.cfp. All right, click next, next, next. And now it's importing the database, and from that it will create all my entities and properties and so on. So I don't have to create everything from scratch at the very beginning. I can start from an existing application. And if we open the surface, well, if you check out the model, you can see all the entities, and here's the model. So basically, now that I got this model, I can start a new cycle and create a new .NET application, and I can generate an entirely new application with a new database and the new classes and so on. But I could also, like, say for instance, if I imported an existing SQL Server database, I could actually create a new business object model layer and upper layers, but I could actually build on my existing database. I could only upgrade it and interoperate with the existing one rather than migrating to a brand new application. So this is it for the demonstration. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint presentation for a few last slides before jumping to the question and answers part. So before concluding, I'd like to show you some extra features of the product that are out of the box, but that weren't presented in this demonstration. So among them, I mean, there's way more, but I mean, the main ones, I guess, are sorting, paging, and guide security in the product. You can localize your data as well as resources. You can cache. You have Google-like text search. As you've briefly seen in the demonstration, it also basically supports WCF communication, built-in integration for binary large objects. We got CodeFluent patterns, also known as aspects, which you can develop yourself to add entire features to application-wide features. The runtimes providing lots of controls to ease your developments, while your UI developments. It also supports Office and Access applications. The key points that I hope that this demonstration really emphasized are that using CodeFluent entities, you have a centralized model from which you can generate continuously throughout your application life cycle. You can also migrate and interoperate with existing applications. Also very flexible, since basically supporting a new technology is almost as easy as adding a new producer. It's also very extensible and consistent. All the generating code has the same look and support the best practices. Also, all that is documented, is very extensible, since you can use the CodeFluent Entities API and extend the product at your will. And other key points are that it enhances code production control. You can structure teamwork with that, absorb more easily functional changes, and decouple from technology, since, as you've seen, your business logic is isolated into this model from which you're going to drive all your developments, minimize risk, and create predictability. Well, I haven't shown you, but you can create reports from your model and with all kinds of statistics and metrics which you can use for your project management. Okay, so that's basically it for this webinar. If you have any questions or questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Okay, well, if ever you have some more questions, or if you want to have a talk with us, don't hesitate contacting us on the forums or through our info@softfluent.com email address, and we'll be glad to answer you. And now, before ending this webinar, we're going to end with a few more questions, two more. The first one is, at this stage, do you consider evaluating CodeFluent entities further? So if you could all please answer the question so we can move to the next one and final one. All right. And the last one, did this webinar meet your expectations? Okay, thank you very much. Have a good day, and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.